If there is one thing that is categorically true about gamers, it's that they can be very particular. Whether it's in the RGB settings on our tech or the character that we perpetually insta-lock, us capital G gamers sure do love our freedom of choice. That being said, not all choices are advantageous. Beyond any doubt, there are certain things we can choose that are going to be objectively better than others. And this is especially true in the servers of our two most prolifically covered tac shooters. You see, CSGO and VALORANT are economy shooters, which means that in some respects, they are quite literally mathematical. In fact, in order to play these games, you don't just have to be mechanically savvy, but financially as well. But there is one mandate that players across both games don't always agree on, since admittedly, there isn't always a clear answer. Namely, when should you upgrade your armor? Although the benefits of buying additional armor might seem rather obvious, the question of when you should capitalize on them has actually been a mildly contentious topic in CSGO for quite some time. Due to the stats of certain weapons and the financial stress that head armor inflicts on the already fragile CT economy, there is an argument that paying extra to protect your noggin might not always be the right call. Now, things have come full circle, because that same conversation is happening around heavy armor in VALORANT, and we are even seeing teams opt out of the added protection at the pro level. But is it the right call? Can not upgrading your armor in these games be a big brain strat or cause more harm than good? Well, come along and let's find out. Okay, so before we dive into all of this armor conversation, I want to very quickly ask that you please like the video, subscribe to the channel, and if you are so inclined, turn on notifications. Also, be sure to check out our new live streaming initiatives. Liz and I are going to be streaming once a week on Twitch, and I will be streaming hot retakes live, just like you all asked for, on YouTube every week as well. So please, if you're down, tune in, see you there. Whether it's Siege, Apex, or even Dota, armor generally has the same theory. It allows a player to absorb more damage before they die. However, the way in which armor is implemented is completely different from title to title. And sometimes the explanation of how armor works can be confusing to say the least. Luckily for us, for the purposes of this episode, we're only going to be focusing on CSGO and VALORANT. And since this whole debacle started in Counter-Strike, we too will start there. In CSGO, there are two levels of armor: Kevlar vest and Kevlar vest plus helmet. When starting in any game that isn't casual, the player spawns without any armor. To get the standard Kevlar vest, the player has to drop $650. For Kevlar and a helmet, they gotta drop $1,000.
One helmet, please.
Now, the intricacies of CSGO's armor infrastructure are actually a needlessly complicated subject, and as a result, there are a ton of videos and articles breaking it down to the most minute detail. For the sake of our video's economic focus, we will do the best to try to simplify the mechanical side of things. Basically, Kevlar protects your torso, groin, and arms, and head armor protects, well, your head. Your face. If you take damage with armor, it will absorb a portion of that damage based on the armor penetration of that weapon. CSGO mastermind 3Clicks Philip made a really solid explanation a few years ago.
For simplicity's sake, let's imagine a gun had 50% armor penetration, like the Nova or the CT starting pistols, ish. Whatever damage it deals to you will be split 50-50 between your health and your armor. So say a bullet does 60 damage, it would deduct 30 of that from your health and 30 from your armor, leaving you at 70 health and 85 armor. Because remember, it's made up of 200 hit points, so 30 damage to the armor is only 15% of its total.
Without head armor, there are a lot of guns in the game that will one-tap you due to their headshot damage. But for guns that don't have enough armor penetration to one-shot a helmeted player, such as the M4s, the Galil, FAMAS, USP, Glock, etc., they will be dinked instead. But as a result of some weapons' armor penetration being higher than what the helmet can protect against, they will still be a one-shot headshot regardless of whether your head is protected. Weapons like the Deagle, Krieg, AWP, AUG, Keck 9, and 5.7 from close range, and most iconically, the AK-47.
At least they'll succeed, but they need to win this. Oh my lord! Fife, what are you doing?
He's got one bullet in it. He's reloaded, he's got one bullet.
Oh! Scream!
My hands are shaking, but I'm still shooting! I'm still getting the headshots!
And herein lies the root of the so-called anti-helmet thesis. Since there are so many commonly purchased weapons that one-shot headshot, regardless of whether you have head armor, why not just not buy head armor and forego the $350 entirely? But since CSGO is asymmetrical, this really only applies to the CT side. Now, this may sound painfully obvious, but for a lot of new players out there coming from non-TAC economy shooters, it may not go without saying. CSGO is a game where you want to use the best guns whenever possible, which means that on a full buy, Ts are going to be using either the AWP or the AK like a lot of the time. Two of the weapons that one-shot headshot no matter the armor.
Twanu takes Alexi B before being instantly traded by Alu. What a shot by Twanu.
Assume someone's around, right?
The CTs aren't afforded that luxury. For balancing purposes, both the M4A4 and A1S take 2 shots to the head to kill if the player has a helmet. This means that Ts are basically always going to want to get head armor to protect against CT weapons, since very few of them one-shot through armor. But with CT side, the reasons as to one may buy or not buy head armor can get pretty granular. So let's lay them out and work through them. Not buying head armor basically comes down to economy. If you are confident that the other team will be rolling into sight with AKs, OPS, or Kriegs, then you may as well save the money for a defuse kit or some extra utility. Now, although this is basically the only sound argument against head armor, it is very difficult to overstate the importance of a defuse kit or just one well-timed flash or smoke. And if you look at the stats of basically every professional CSGO tournament, weapons that can one-tap make up the majority of kills every time. That being said, there are absolutely circumstances in which the CTs will definitely want to buy head armor. For starters, if you are not 100% certain that the Ts aren't on a force, eco, or bonus, then you're probably going to want to make sure you have that saucepan on your head. There is nothing more painful than dumping thousands of dollars into a full buy and getting absolutely fried by a W warrior wielding a Mac 10, which literally happened to Jax at the PGL Major. Instead of forking up cash for head armor, he was a good teammate and bought a defuse kit, and unfortunately, paid the price.
Are they going to try and speed it up? Hampus is in Arch. He's in so deep. Jax is going to go down. That's a big stop. Hunter inside of the bomb side. He's flashed. He can't see anything, and he gets swamped.
On top of that, there are a ton of more situational reasons that you might want to pick up head armor. The most common of which is probably if you win pistol on CT and you're buying up in the second round, absolutely buy head armor. The enemy team is either going to save and have Glocks, which you definitely don't want to get one-tapped by, or they're going to force up, most likely, into Mac 10s or Galils, which you also don't want to get one-tapped by. It also just generally eliminates aim punch, protects against a pistoling AWPer, and can even save you from a frustrating wallbang. Knowing when to not buy head armor is a tricky thing. You not only have to have a good understanding of the economy and what position you're playing, but who you're playing against. It can sometimes take a couple of rounds of sort of feeling your opponent out before you know what you can get away with. Now, for many of you, this is common knowledge. Pros and plebs alike have been ditching the bucket for some extra cash on CT side for years now. But with Valorant serving as a gateway of sorts, a ton of new players are getting into CS, many of whom have genuine questions about the intricacies of armor and the economy at large. Speaking of VALORANT, which also has a two-tiered armor system, the conversation surrounding when and when not to upgrade one's armor has become even more prominent. So, what about Valorant?
What about Yamcha?
What about Yamcha?
Well, since this is Valorant we're talking about, their armor system is ostensibly a carbon copy of CSGO's. That said, they're actually a lot less alike than you might think. Valorant's shields come in two forms, light and heavy. Both shields absorb 66.6% of incoming damage, but they both have thresholds. Light shields, which cost 400 credits, will break after only 25 hit points. Heavy shields cost 1,000 credits and will break after 50 hit points. That's a huge difference in price. But, as in CSGO, there are a ton of situations where that extra money and extra armor will make all the difference, since there are weapons that will one-shot headshot you depending on your armor situation. That's especially true since, crucially, a heavy shield isn't just a helmet. It protects your body as well. On top of that, damage fall off in Valorant is way more prominent. For example, the Sheriff does 159 damage to the head from 0 to 30 meters. That's enough to one-tap even through heavy shields.
Reyna's healing up. Don't come. Heaven.
But once you go past that 30-meter mark, the headshot damage falls to 145, leaving your opponent with 5 HP. Now, that may not seem like a lot.
The reason it's so good is because it's so bad to be dead. It's not like life's so f***ing great.
So you might be wondering, if there are so many benefits, why wouldn't you just upgrade your armor whenever you have the credits? Well, just like CS, Valorant has a ton of weapons that will inflict a one-shot headshot regardless of armor. And one of those weapons, the Vandal, makes up for almost 45% of all kills across events.
Forsaken performing under the pressure to get to aims, the reset! Absolutely ridiculous!
It's also worth mentioning that the Phantom, Valorant's amalgamation of the A4 and A1S, essentially, can still one-shot kill up to 15 meters. So, although it's not a great distance, you technically still aren't safe from the other premium rifle either. And then of course there's the little things, like Chamber, that French bastard who gets to pull guns out of his ass that all one-shot kill. If you're facing up against Chamber, which nowadays, let's be honest, you always are, heavy armor might be a futile purchase. On top of that, you never really know what weapons your opponent is going to buy. Reading the enemy's economy is a lot easier in Valorant than it is in CSGO, since you can literally see the enemy team's money, but with abilities, one-tricks, and off-color guns being as strong as they are, you never really know.
It's all very situational. In my head, I do like 3 to 4 like if-else statements in my head before I decide whether or not I want to buy the extra 13 armor for $1,000. It's how much money do we have? How much money do I have? How much money does the other team have? What map are we playing, right? And how many rounds are left in the half? And I guess sometimes players can't really wrap their head around a lot of that kind of stuff, and they can't make a logical decision, and they're just like, okay, well, I don't really know. So you know what? I'm just gonna buy it because better safe than sorry.
Now, realistically, we could just end the video right here. But it wouldn't be a Cracked if we didn't include a good old case study. People have been talking about armor in Valorant since launch, but recently it's become even more of a hot button issue. A lot of that is owed to NRG esports. Over the past couple of months, they have been shaking things up due to their performances on half-buys and eco rounds. Valorant commentator Bren took notice and checked out the numbers. He found out that during a half-buy or eco, NRG had a win rate of 66.6%. Optic and Xset were higher, but didn't have the same amount of rounds played, making NRG a clear outlier. Now, their success with less money can be attributed to a lot of things, but what's interesting is that NRG also seems to skip out on heavy shields quite frequently, even when they have the money. And in the clips we see here, they still won rounds with light armor. Now, it doesn't always work out in their favor, but skipping out on armor still has its benefits. And NRG's commitment to experimenting with their economy can be extremely useful in the long run.
It definitely made a lot of sense because they had overall more buy rounds when they shouldn't have. Where they were getting stomped like 8-0 or something, and like they had a lot more buy rounds than they should have. They were able to afford a lot more util than they should have. So in the end of the day, like they had a better fighting chance, albeit it didn't really pan out, but they had a lot more chances to succeed by doing that.
It's for sure a risky strat, but it's not insane. The Vandal and Chamber are very much a part of the current meta. So if the enemy team is running that setup, heavy shields could be rendered useless. As a player, you need to make sure that you consider all of the possibilities.
If you know the team you're playing, or if you know, like the map you're playing on is like Breeze, for example, right? I think running light armor and keeping your bank healthy is totally a viable option because 9 out of 10 people on that server are going to be running Vandal.
Now, this may all seem a little bit extra, and in the grand scheme of things, even unimportant. But let me tell you, armor is a very expensive part of CSGO and Valorant's respective economies. And like I mentioned before, both these games are about making very subtle economic decisions that will in turn affect your mechanical decisions that can then affect the outcome of an entire match. But even players at the highest level don't always have a perfect understanding of how armor works. That, or it's just the creeping suspicion that it's always better to be safe than sorry.
Did you know that you don't need to rebuy your armor if you have more than 50 points as T and 57 points as CT?
I actually never knew that, and I always do wonder.
And someone crunched the numbers. RPK wasted $7,000 at ASL1 Cologne rebuying armor he didn't need to.
Could have used that to pay his taxes.
Certainly could have.
But what if you only take one sliver of damage over the course of the round? Is it still worth rebuying your armor, or should you just leave it as is? For that, I'm going to direct you to Colton.
And now, the guy who actually knows what he's talking about.
If you're a League player or a Battle Royale guy and you made it this far into the video, let me know in the comments, because you are the real heroes. Now, I promise at some point we'll actually get to talk about tech again, but for now, let me break down what I think is probably the biggest difference between Counter-Strike and Valorant's armor implementations. Like Dimitri already mentioned, Valorant's armor absorbs 2/3, 66% of incoming damage up to 25 or 50 HP. CS armor, on the other hand, absorbs 200 HP worth of damage to specific parts of the body, based on the armor penetration rate of the gun you're being shot by. So let's look at an example from Counter-Strike. And for simplicity's sake, we're just going to look at the rifles excluding the AUG and the SG. On average, they will do 73% of their damage to your health and 27% to your armor. These are basically complete opposites. It's incredibly difficult to take serious damage to your armor and live in Counter-Strike, but downright commonplace to have your armor broken in a Valorant gunfight. Shelling out the money to repair your armor in CS is rarely worthwhile, and thanks to Machine, now you know the thresholds for when you should. Because I definitely didn't know. You Valorante players, get ready to keep repairing your armor like you're playing Apex. The obvious impact of all this is that the economic advantage when winning consecutive rounds tends to be less pronounced in Valorant than it is in CSGO, because you're spending a lot of extra money repairing your armor. But that's all I've got for you guys. You know, we really should consider not using that title card when I'm talking about tack shooters. It's just blatantly untrue, and I don't think any—
And that was the guy who actually knows what he's talking about.
So when it comes to you guys, our lovely viewers, should you buy head armor or heavy armor when you have the credits more often than not? I'm going to say yes, but there is an asterisk. There are so many different things going on in any given round, and in the majority of elos, it's important to focus on your gameplay, aiming, and the fundamentals. Having that extra head armor will protect you in a lot of situations. Plus, it'll give you peace of mind in a scary, slow, methodical tack shooter that is sort of inherently designed to mess with your psyche. Is it better to buy a FAMAS with util or an M4 without? There's no one clear answer. It depends. But if you're getting rolled by a T-side running 5 AKs and you're running short on utility, or you keep getting deleted by a chamber every time you peek mid, maybe it's time to start thinking critically about your armor buys. Just don't come crying to me if you get one tapped by a Bison because you upgraded to an AUG instead of buying head armor. Whatever you buy, just live with it. Valorant's like not even in my top 5 favorite tack shooters.
F-wording?
Top 2.
5 tack shooters?
I would literally take Arma over fucking Valorant, bro. I would take Crunker over Valorant a fucking heartbeat. I don't know if there is like a search and destroy mode in Crunker, but if there isn't, there should be. And I would take Crunker over Valorant in 2 seconds. That's the end board right there. Not even top 5.
Right, I'm trying to sound like a child, right? She's full of life. She doesn't know about climate change yet. Okay, let's do this. What do people in anime do? They go like, I don't know, bro. Oh my god. And he listens to